The college football playoff is set, and it's already a mess. People are mad. People are angry. Some people are wiping sweat off their brow. Michigan at number 1, Washington at 2, Texas at 3, and Alabama at 4. Undefeated Florida State winning their conference championship last night without their starting quarterback, who's done for the season, unless some type of miracle hoodoo's done for him on his leg. And then the second string quarterback didn't even play yesterday because of I guess, concussion protocol, something like that. They couldn't move the ball if you put a gun to the grandma's heads. They still won, but Florida State doesn't know why they were left out. I'm going to dive into that and more. Hey, I'm Brian. Thanks for joining me on Clemson Football Live. I do appreciate you joining me here. I hope you hit the subscribe button. It is free. It's a great and easy way to support the channel. Now, yesterday, I made a post on my YouTube channel. It's basically like a tweet, you know? And it really, really stirred the pot. And it was something along the lines of Florida State is missing their quarterback, and of course, that's a big deal. But to paraphrase, if they end up in the college football playoff, based on what I see tonight, the defense looked great, by the way. Florida State's defense looked fantastic. Their offense couldn't move the ball until they went to a wildcat formation and finally got something. Louisville looked bad. It looked terrible. ACC championship it was very blah. And Clemson's played in some blah ACC championships where they went in, beat the crap out of the other team. And if you were a non-Clemson fan, you were like, man, that was boring. Florida State looked bad. That's why you were left out. Alabama beats a team that's won 29 consecutive games, 2 consecutive national championships, and you wonder why they got in over you? Now, if you want to argue from the point of deserving, you got to think that one of the other teams that's in the college football playoff is the only other team to beat Alabama this year, no matter how bad at times that they looked. And by the way, that Texas team, for everybody who wants to keep talking about the Alabama win in Tuscaloosa, yeah, that Texas team lost to an Oklahoma team that's not even a playoff contender. So there's that little bit of information that will drive you. Michigan and Washington, they solidified themselves throughout the season. And to remind you, at 3 minutes and 15 seconds into this video, that this will not be a problem next season. Next year, Georgia will be in. Georgia finished at, what, number 5 or number 6? What is that? Let's see. Georgia was number 6. Florida State was number 5. By the way, I don't have comments turned on right now. I just want to be able to focus. I'll say hello to everyone in just a second. Appreciate you being here. Michigan solidified it. Washington, they looked dominant. Texas played nobody yesterday. I knew as soon as I heard that Oklahoma State was represented, I was like, might as well give the title to Texas. And people were worried that Texas was going to be left out. And yesterday I talked about, hey, don't be shocked after a 3-point game that Alabama gets in and they might try to sneak Georgia in. Probably not going to happen, but don't be shocked. The playoff committee, they love doing stuff like this all the time, no matter if the members change or if they're the same. They always love doing this. But everybody rest assured, Texas is in. Texas is in. If Florida State would have got in, they'd have got there, unless Jordan Travis was magically healed, a Christmas miracle. They were going to get their head beat in. And I can tell you this, TCU embarrassed themselves last year. Nobody remembers anything about that season except they lost 65-7 in the national championship. That's what we remember. Got a bunch of people in here. Grillmaster, playoff committee has caused all ACC member institutions to the tune of millions of dollars. Pretty much. Florida State, while they were in the transfer portal last year, should have picked up a better second-string quarterback. That would have helped them. I'm worried about that with Clemson right now, too. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. Lucas, Andrew, not happy with it. Steven says, roll tide. Mr. U Mad Bra, one of my oldest subscribers. ACC, once again, everyone is saying it. Committee literally said 4 best teams, so they can't go back on your words, especially if it carries a lot of weight. Anybody seen SEC Dog? No. I saw one of the biggest Georgia Bulldog fans in the world today, and they're really good people. They're friends of mine, and I think they were at the game yesterday, and they were just, it is what it is. You know, you're going to end up, you know, you're going to lose. Clemson fans have had to deal with this. Georgia fans are now dealing with it. Lucas Andrews said, watching Jordan Travis tweet, I wish I broke my leg earlier, almost brought me to tears. See, that's the thing. If Jordan Travis played in that game last night against Louisville, I want to be perfectly clear with you. I'm going to have to turn off the comment section because I can't pay attention to 2 things at once. If Jordan Travis would have played in that game with Florida State yesterday, as poorly as Louisville has been playing, and I've really enjoyed watching the story of Louisville, but man, they've had, as someone put it, they have gas for 10 games, but they have to play 12. And yesterday they had to play 13, and Louisville does not look good. Louisville does not look good. Still, what Brian Brom has done is incredible, but Florida State with Jordan Travis last night, would have beat Louisville by 5 touchdowns. And Florida State would be in the college football playoff today. I believe that. Let me rephrase that. I could see them being in it, and that would be a stronger argument. But folks, you need to hear me out. Alabama beating a team, and I could care less about Alabama and definitely could care less about Georgia. I'm glad they're out. But Alabama beating a team who has won 29 consecutive games and was going for a 3-peat of a national championship, as much as some of you don't want to accept it, you want to stick your fingers in your ear and go, la, 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 la. It matters. Only to turn, after that game, you turn off of that game. It's like, man, this is a crazy, wow, what a competitive game. There's NFL talent everywhere. Both these teams are historically good, especially in the past 15 years for Bama and the past 5 or 6 for Georgia, 4 or 5 for Georgia. And then you turn over to the ACC championship game, and Florida State can't move the ball if you put them on a bus and drove them there. You think the committee didn't see that? Well, Brian, that's not how I judge this thing. I told you it's not based on deserving, folks. And by the way, Florida State doesn't deserve to be there after what I watched last night. You have to take the season as a whole. So if we're arguing about undefeated and winning conference championships, if a MAC championship, if a team from the MAC goes undefeated and they win their championship game against Toledo, that means by your argument, it should matter that they end up in the college football playoff. Forget that they would get blown out by 9,000 points. And folks, again, next year, we won't have to worry about this. Georgia will be in. Florida State will be in. Let's see what the rest of the, where's the rest of the poll? I haven't seen the rest of the poll. Y'all forgive me. I want to see the final poll with all the teams. Final college playoff rankings 2023. That's 13 hours ago. I don't care about that. I want to see now. That's final AP poll. I could care less about that. My point here, and I got a bunch of you in here. Some of you just left church like I did, ate some lunch, and you just now figured out. Some of you, maybe you're working, maybe you're just hanging out this morning. You're trying to figure it out. I appreciate you all being in here. Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama. So Michigan and Alabama will play first round. Washington and Texas will play first round. And the winner of those two games will meet for a national championship. Florida State is left out. Their quarterback with his broken leg matters. That's not the same team that you would be putting in the college football playoff. I mean, good Lord, Florida State got a. I mean, they're a lot better than what they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Okay, kudos to them. And I would have to say this about Clemson. And by the way, I do say stuff about my own Tigers like this. That's why there's a lot of people who they don't like me, and they'll turn over to some radio station in the upstate area who will kind of criticize Clemson. But at the end of the day, if Dabo's cooking it, they're eating it. They're eating it, and they're eating it up. And they're talking about how good it is as the juice, the Dabo Sweeney meal juices just run down their little face. And then they wonder why their team falls apart later. They're shocked when I told them all along what was going to happen. So if I say it about my own team, I'm going to say it about other teams. Michigan makes sense to be in the college football playoff. Washington makes sense to be in the college football playoff. Texas makes sense, although their loss was not a great one. It was not a terrible one. Oklahoma is up and coming. But Alabama's loss to Texas was not near as bad as Texas lost to Oklahoma. If we're going to do this little argument, folks. And we can agree to disagree. That's fine. That's what this is. We're just talking college football. We get passionate about it. But at the end of this day, at the end of the day, when you and I go check our bank account, we haven't made any money off of this. Hopefully your priorities are based on your relationship with the Lord and the relationship with your family. Important stuff. This is a pastime. We all like talking about it. It gets us away from the stress of life. So we don't have to get dirty or personal about it. Some like to do that. I wonder what's wrong with them. But just talking about this sport, talking about this hobby, Michigan, Washington, Texas makes sense. Alabama makes sense over a Florida State team who is missing the reason they won their most important games. Who's playing quarterback for you matters. Ask Duke about Riley Leonard after he got hurt. See, the Duke team that the next, I don't know, half at least of the season that everybody played is not the same Duke team that played Clemson on a Monday night. That everybody laughed about, and you should. Clemson lost by 21 points to Riley Leonard. There's a bunch of teams who didn't have to play Riley Leonard this year, and they beat them. Florida State being one of them. I think he came in for a little bit, and then he had to go out because he was just too beat up. Who plays quarterback for you matters. That's why Matt Rule said within the past 7 to 10 days, a good quarterback is going to cost you about $2 million. Why? Because who is calling the shots for your offense out on the field matters. Jordan Travis proves this. This is not something that has never happened before. A good team loses their starting quarterback who is a bona fide leader. Jordan Travis impressed me against Clemson this year because Clemson just kept beating him and slapping his head and I mean, blah, 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 blah. I'm just beat him. And the guy, I mean, he's out there messed up and he's still fighting. I was very impressive. Florida State just issued a statement about the credibility of the committee. Hey, look, if you are truly rebuilt like you said you are, you'll be back in. All you have to do is get in the top 12 next year. You don't even have to be a conference champion. So this is why people want an expanded playoff. But Jordan Travis is not playing for Florida State. So it does matter who's playing on the field. Just like this year when the Colorado Buffaloes beat TCU in the very first game of the year, everybody was saying they just beat a team that was in the national championship. Hold on, they beat the logo, but Max Duggan wasn't there, Quentin Johnson wasn't there, Garrett Riley wasn't there. I mean, my Lord, take all the variables and put them together. Shake them out. Michigan has went through a lot of problems this year. I've said it once, I'll say it again. Jim Harbaugh has really ticked off somebody very powerful because he no more than served his suspension than the signal stealing allegations come up. Excuse me. And then the Big Ten goes, oh yeah. Since you do that whole self-imposed thing, we're not going to push it anymore, folks. If they had proof that he actually did what they were claiming that he did, oh no, it's that other guy, but he had knowledge of it. If he did, Michigan should be forced to fire him in some form. But see, what I'm saying is either they're covering for him or they never had what they peddled to everybody that they had. And they still ended up in undefeated. Washington, Michael Penix Jr., great story. Michael Penix Jr. looks like a man playing football. It's so funny watching him throw with a left-handed throw. My dad's a lefty. It's still funny to watch. But they look really good. Texas has pulled it together. I would say out of these 4 teams that are in, Texas, I don't know. I think Texas has been shoved down our throat for so many years of how good they are, only to not be that good, that maybe I'm a little gun shy. But they're still a good football team. They got in. Alabama doing what they did last night. Alabama has not looked dominant this year. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. But there's a lot of people who is hopefully wanting Alabama to stop being so dominant. Because then you don't have to deal with Bama anymore. You don't have to deal with Saban. He's just getting old. He's lost his fire. No. He hasn't lost his fire. And Georgia plays the first good football team of this entire season. Hey, they can't help their season. They can't help that Tennessee put all their eggs in the Milton basket. And like I told him in the preseason, he had one good game against one good team, and it was unfortunately against my Tigers. And they ended up falling apart. They can't help that Florida went out and hired someone who the job was just too big for them. And now they're 5-7 in Gainesville, flipping Florida. They can't help that. They can't help that the University of South Carolina is, well, they're being consistently bad, as they've always been bad. So you can't blame Georgia for their schedule within conference. I mean, I know that as a Clemson fan, we've had to play schedule and people point their fingers, go, hey, you're a terrible schedule. And then we go in, we beat the crap out of Notre Dame. We beat the crap out of Alabama. Blank Ohio State, 31-0, win the national championship. Do something that those same people who was talking about our schedule, they couldn't do. They couldn't even fathom it. So I get it. I get the whole Georgia thing in their schedule. I'm being fair here. But they play Alabama, and Alabama beats them. Once again, folks, this could have been expanded a long time ago. Probably a contract kept it from being expanded. And then what they do, I've seen this so many times. The leadership makes the decision. They have their lawyers work on it. The contracts are drawn up. When you sign a contract means something for the most part, unless you can figure a way out of it or pay out of it. And then afterwards, you put a spokesman or spokespeople in front of a camera, and you have them peddle a narrative for the time being of that contract. That this would not be good for college football for us to have more than 4 teams in a playoff. You remember when they said that they couldn't figure out how to go to a number 1 and a number 2? You remember that? For some of you young people who's watching this, there was a flipping time where number 1 could play number 4. Number 4 wins, and they win the national championship. Number 2 and number 3 played in another game. Number 2 won, and somehow number 4 is number 1. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, does it? But it told us that a playoff wasn't. Why? We know why. We know why. So next year, this won't happen again. If you can get in the top 12 next year, congratulations. And there will be controversy at number 11, number 12, and number 13, and number 14. But at least the top 10. Next year, there'll be no excuse. If you go and you blow it and you end up number 13, best of luck to you, pal. You can be appalled and upset and all those other words. Florida State got left out because their very talented quarterback unfortunately got hurt. And that happened to Riley Leonard. That's happened to other teams over the years. And it is sad and it is awful. But you put Florida State in off of principle, you are not putting in the 4 best teams. You're putting in someone who before he got hurt could be in the discussion. Before Jordan Travis got hurt, they could be in the discussion of being part of the 4 best teams. But after that mockery of the game last night in the ACC championship, the offense couldn't move the ball. Well, that was our 3rd string. What? So put Rodemaker in? Who almost lost to Florida? 5-7 Florida. Notice TCU didn't do too well this year. Well, Brian, you just said they lost a bunch of people. True. But they could have raided the portal. Said we were just in the national championship. You know why no one wanted to go out there and play for them? Very few people wanted to leave the transfer portal and go play at TCU because of 65-7 national championship game. It'll hurt you more than it helps you. Florida State, this might be a blessing in disguise. You might not want to hear that right now. You might be upset and go, this was Clemson. If this was Clemson and our starting quarterback was out, and then our 2nd string quarterback didn't look that good, and then last night we had a 3rd stringer in, and we couldn't score against a team that's just okay. I mean, they're way better than what they used to be, but they're still okay. And then the Alabama-Georgia game had just happened. And the night before, Washington and Oregon had just went on. Now, if I'm just going to be spouting principle, I think the playoff committee is supposed to put in the 4 best teams. And Florida State, I hate it for them. After Jordan Travis got hurt, he's not one. They're not one of them. With him, there's a discussion to be made. Very impressive player, and it's sad what happened to him. But he's not playing for them. He's done. He's hurt. Going in here in the comments, I'm not going to be able to answer all these. There's a ton of people in here. By the way, if you want to subscribe to the channel, there's 122 of you in here. I appreciate you joining me. Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, that is your top 4. Florida State is left out. Georgia drops to number 6 after 29 consecutive wins and 2 consecutive national championships. And next year, this will not be a problem. There will be 12 spots for your team to get in. And if you can't make it into 12 spots, I don't want to hear it. Marty Garrison's in here, said, I agree with you about Florida State. Do you think Clemson is going to be in the Duke Mayo Bowl to the forehead? Quite honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they went to the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl. Clemson needs to still. I still think that there needs to be maybe a couple of more changes. One particular, but anyway. Got a bunch of people who disagrees with me. Zoe Zucci says Alabama struggles against Auburn. They get in. We beat Louisville, and this clown states we don't belong in the playoffs. Kick rocks. Okay, that's fine. Just remember the Florida State team that beat Clemson in double overtime. They were struggling against us when it's some of our worst that we've been in about 12 years. Took them double overtime, even with Travis in it. They don't have Travis. You'll get embarrassed. You want to talk about hurting your brand? I'm kind of wishing Florida State would have got in, got beat by 30 points in the first round. And how does Norvell come back from that? Yeah, I'll kick rocks. I'll kick rocks and I'll be right. Yeah. Yeah. Cardale Jones is not playing in this game. Let me see. Tiger Man's in here. Calvin Jones. Defense wins games. I do agree that defense wins games, but you have to have an offense. Once you get into these Final Four games or these Final Four teams, you have to move the football. But I agree with you. You have to have a complete at this point when you get into the college football playoff, and Clemson knows the college football playoff better than any other team except for Alabama. You have to be an almost complete football team. Most would argue a complete football team at every level. This is not where you get to come in and say, well, we got a really good defense, but we're Iowa and we only put up 3 points per game. How did that work out for them last night against Michigan? Just like logic says it would. They got pounded. They played tough, but once you go up by like 14 to 17 points on Iowa, that's the equivalent of about 5 touchdowns versus other teams because their offense is so terrible. Going through these comments. Calvin Jones says, ESPN openly promotes SEC. Of course they do. Real McCoy says FSU would have got whooped with no quarterback. Yeah, that's what happened last night. And maybe this pushes FSU to leave the ACC. Super Conference is still coming. The Big Ten, y'all, everybody's forgetting it right now. The Big Ten has formed the Super Conference from sea to shining sea. They just need a couple of teams here in the South because that's the only place they don't have. They don't have a team or representation is in the area of the Southeastern Conference. That's not going away. Still Gamble, one of my members here, the committee got it right. I think the committee did get it right. I hate it. Florida State's quarterback got hurt. I'm telling you, folks, you put Florida State in there based on principle. You're not putting in the Florida State team that beat Clemson in Death Valley. You're putting in a Florida State team that has a really good defense and a bunch of tall wide receivers who they can't get the football to them. And Benson's good, but he's not good enough to run behind that offensive line and carry a team to a national championship on his back. When all the defense, the opposing defense has to walk up, all they have to do is walk up their defense to the line and say, yeah, we know your quarterback can't throw because he's not Jordan Travis. And so those big tall wide receivers, we can shut them down. And Benson, he's not Barry Sanders. He's good, but he's not Barry Sanders. We're just going to walk up. I'm talking about Michigan. I'm talking about Washington. I'm talking about Texas. They're going to walk up. They're going to shut that run down. And at the end of the game, the only thing that you can hold on to and cradle like a baby doll is that you put a team in who was 13-0 and won their conference championship. But it's not the team that everybody was talking about weeks ago when Jordan Travis was there. Nope, 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 nope. And you'll be talking about probably a 4-touchdown loss at least. And then the talking point would be, well, man, if we had Jordan Travis, that's why they didn't put you in. They got it right. It's funny. What's so funny about Clemson? Clemson gets brought up in this whole talking, in the whole talking points that Clemson would be left out. The Trevor Lawrence Clemson team wouldn't be left out of this. I'm sorry. The Trevor Lawrence team underperformed and they still got in. The Deshaun Watson team, yeah, that was a beast team. People like to throw that around, and those are the very same teams that A, didn't have to play us because they wasn't good enough, or B, they did play us and they lost. In the Trevor Lawrence freshman year, and then those in the sophomore and junior year of Deshaun Watson, yeah, you lost. Clemson now, if Clemson would have somehow ran the table this year, but they looked weak, and they barely won last night, and Cade Klubnik was sitting on the bench, yeah, they would have got left out. And they should. You know why? Because it took running the Wildcat against a bad football team, or subpar football team, to win. And your quarterback's not going to be out. That's what a lot. This is like talking in circles. It's fantastic. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining me. There's a bunch of you in here. I hope you hit the subscribe button. If you want to support on a monthly basis, there is a join button below it. It's $3 or $5 per month. I have 2 tiers, and I do appreciate the support. Good luck to all of these teams that have been playing. And once again, I'm going to tell you again, it's this year. I know it's annoying for Florida State and so on. Next year, there's 12 teams. So we have tripled the size of the playoff. So next year, you can lose your conference championship if you're in the power, well, I guess it'll be power 4. You can lose it and you can still end up in the college football playoff. Florida State would still be in the college football playoff without Jordan Travis next year. And they could lose without Jordan Travis like they would, and everybody will go, well, if Jordan Travis play, yeah. I know it's tough, but you would, Florida State fans, you would get murdered, and it would hurt your brand so much. Now, for me, I could care less if your brand's hurt. If your brand's hurt and you lose by 40 points in the college football playoff, and you get decimated, and then people are like, I don't want to go down there and lose like that. That's fine with me. But I'm just talking from a brand standpoint. You would rather go into a non-playoff bowl and potentially win versus go into the playoff and get your head ripped off. You might get to play Georgia. Go beat Georgia. If they put you in a bowl game, then you talk trash all you want to, but I don't think that'll happen. Folks, you take care of yourself. I'll catch you later. As always, go Tigers.